I've never talked about the fact that I had to take supplements and stuff to even get my brain to function enough to be able to start down this journey. There is no shame in it. And I'm just now realizing I haven't talked about it because I was still holding some shame around it. And it's crazy what our society has done to us that with so many people suffering from things like this, we have created a society where we're not allowed to talk about it because it's shameful. And like I said in the beginning, I know it's shifting, but as far as I'm concerned, it's not shifting enough. Welcome back to the Rebel Reality Podcast. I'm your host, Erica Lester, and this is the show where we're pulling back the curtains on what we've been taught to believe about life so that we can make our own rules and live a life that feels as good on the inside as it looks on the outside, all while doing our part to make the world a better place. I'm so excited you guys are here. Today's episode is going to be a little different than what you're used to so far. It's just me, no guest today. And actually, this episode was completely unplanned. It actually came from a nudge from the universe, of course, like everything else I do. I was on a call with a client this morning and just happened to see a book in my office closet that I haven't noticed for years. And it was a book about depression. And it got me thinking about how I haven't really done my part to share my experience with depression, to change the conversation around mental illness, and to let anyone out there who might be hurting like I was know that you're not alone. And so it really feels good to be having this conversation with you. And if you're listening to this, if you are struggling from depression or some other sort of illness, or if you're not, but you know people who are, or even if you don't, if we can just all do what we can to change the conversation around mental illness, to remove the stigma so people can actually talk about it and get the help that they need, it's such a powerful thing we can do as a group. Someone left a comment on my Instagram post this morning talking about how the brain is just another organ that gets sick. And it got me thinking that we treat mental illness like it's something to be ashamed of, when in all reality, if it was cancer or heart disease or, a broken bone, we wouldn't be ashamed to talk about it. We wouldn't be ashamed to ask for help, and we wouldn't be ashamed to seek the help that we need. And I know that the stigmas are changing, but it really feels like we can do a lot more than we have done so far. And I know that I haven't really done my part in sharing my story up until this point, partially because I also was ashamed, and partially because of this idea of high vibeness. And I'm going to go into that a little more later in the episode. So if you don't know me and you don't know my history, first of all, let me just explain that I am not a medical doctor. I'm not in the medical field at all. I am not giving you health or medical advice. So please just understand I'm just sharing my experiences, my beliefs, and my opinions in the hopes that it'll help someone out there that may be struggling. So I struggled with depression for years. It was undiagnosed. I was confused about why I was so sad, why I would hide in the shower, why no matter how beautiful my life was on the outside, I still didn't feel complete. And it was so bad that I can't even count the number of times that I contemplated or dreamt about ending my life, not waking up after I went to sleep, having a freak accident, like fantasizing about death just simply for the pain to go away. And I shared this story on my Instagram, and I've shared it before, but honestly, I've glossed over it a little bit in the past. Today is really the first time that I'm going truly deeply into what that felt like. But there was a day, probably 8 years ago, don't quote me on that, time is funny, but I was standing in my beautiful house with my keys in my hand for my nice car. My amazing children were downstairs, as was my husband. At the time, I had a great business. We were secure, we were happy, we had everything we were supposed to have, right? And I was standing there in my room with the car keys in my hand, not crying, but breaking on the inside, over and over, just visualizing driving my car off a cliff. I was visualizing walking out of my room, walking down the stairs, walking out the garage, saying goodbye to my family, getting in my car, and going and finding somewhere I could just drive my car off a cliff and be done with it. Add to that, I was crushed under guilt for even being contemplating that, for even thinking about leaving my life, for even thinking about leaving my children, leaving my husband, leaving my parents, leaving my friends and family that loved me. I mean, I was surrounded by amazing people who loved me unconditionally. I still am, by the way. And so I had this ridiculous amount of guilt that was just adding to the problem. How could I possibly be fantasizing leaving my children to fend for themselves? How could they not be enough for me to want to live? And it just was this ugly, ugly, vicious cycle. And I remember standing in my room that day and I knew, I'm sure you've had moments where you've known something so deeply that there's just no question. You feel it on every level. I knew if I left, it was going to be the time that I figured out how to end my life. I was going to find a cliff to drive on or, a river to drown in or who knows, right? Like I knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that if I took the action to walk out of that house and get into my car, that would be the end of it. And I had this beautiful moment of clarity where I realized I had a choice. Through all the crushing guilt, through the depression that was messing with my brain, through everything that was going on inside of me, I had this beautiful moment of clarity that I had a choice to make. I could choose to end my life. I could choose to die because let's not kid ourselves. It is a choice. Now, it might have been a very clouded choice because of where I was at and my difficulty thinking rationally because of the depression, but it still would have been a choice. I had to make the choice to take the action. The other choice was living. And I knew if I chose to live, I knew if I chose to stay in that house and let this moment pass, that I had to choose to learn how to live. I could not continue to live my life the way it was. I could not continue this cycle. I could not continue to feel this way. I physically couldn't do it. And so if I was going to choose to say, I had to choose and I had to make a commitment to myself in that moment that I was going to figure out how to live, not just exist. And obviously you're listening to this, so you know which choice I made, thankfully. For me, I was able and I had the clarity to be able to make that choice. And I had the commitment and the support system and the ability to continue to honor that choice over the coming hours, days, weeks, and months. And I'm not going to kid you. In the beginning, it was minutes. It was minutes of remembering that I had made that commitment and figuring out what I could do for the next 5 minutes to feel better, what I could do for the next 15 minutes to not fantasize about death, what I could do for the next half an hour to make myself feel better. And eventually, farther down the journey, obviously, more of my time was spent feeling good, less of my time was spent feeling miserable. And of course, it hasn't been easy, right? What did I say? It's been like 8 years. I can tell you, if we fast forward and we gloss over all of that, we'll come back to it maybe. I can tell you, and this feels really important to share, particularly if you're out there struggling, I am so thankful I did because I am not the same person I was then. I don't have depression. I understand who I am. I have come home to myself. I feel good most of the time. Now, I'm not going to tell you that there aren't times I'm sad. Of course, I'm sad. I'm human, right? We have emotions. There are purposes for that. I'm not going to tell you there aren't times where I think life is hard. Sometimes it feels really hard when we're in the middle of something that's pushing us. But the difference is that I now know that I would rather be here living this life and that there's amazing joy to be found in every moment. And it's important to me to share that with you because if you're struggling with a mental illness, I just want you to know that at least in my case, and I believe in yours too, there is hope that you don't always have to be in this place of it being a struggle. And like I said, I'm not a medical professional. I don't, it's not valuable to me or to us to get into a debate about, how mental illness is treated or whatever. Like I said in the beginning, I just want to share with you my journey and hopefully some hope that you too can come back to yourself, that you can remember who you are, that you can be whole and complete and happy again. Or for some of us, maybe the first time ever. So I also wanted to share with you some of the journey in case you're looking for, in case you're looking for ideas or it can spark something within you. I we like I said, I posted this on Instagram and somebody had commented on it. The same guy that I was referring to earlier. Part of his comment was, if you can reach out for help, if you can talk to a friend, a family member, a clergy member, a counselor, whatever you can do. And for me, in the beginning, I couldn't do that. I was so ashamed and I had so much belief that I should be able to handle this on my own and that I should be a different person and that there was something wrong with me and so much guilt about where I was at that I couldn't tell anyone. So I started with research and I started by going to my medical doctor. And actually, the trip to my medical doctor was kind of a fluke. Now, if you're listening to this show, if you've heard any other episodes or if you followed me or you know my work, you'll know some of what I believe in. And I truly believe that the universe or spirit or God or, our the larger part of ourselves, whatever terminology you want to use, brings us what we need in the moment when we're open to receiving that and when we've asked for help. And by me declaring my commitment to choosing to live and to figuring out how to truly live, I declared to the universe that I was available for support. And there were actually times where I would cry at night and just ask, I don't even know who or what, because I didn't really have any of these beliefs at that time, not around this topic anyway, that I would ask for help, not even knowing who I was asking for help. And so when I tell you about how I ended up at my doctor's office, it's going to seem a little strange, but understand that in the context, of course, this is how it happened, and it was absolutely perfect. And so basically what happened was I went to my doctor and I said, I want to quit smoking. Now, I had been a 20-year smoker. I started smoking at 15. This was when I was like 34, 35 maybe. So yeah, it was about 8 years ago. I went to my doctor and I said, look, I have been trying to quit smoking basically since I started, right? Like I started at 15. By 20, I was trying to quit smoking by 19. And I said, I can't quit. I have quit. I've quit for 6 months and I was a miserable bitch. Like I was horribly moody and mean and awful to the point where, I'm not kidding you, my husband was like, I would rather you just smoke. Like I couldn't function without smoking, even after 6 months to a year, right? Like that should be plenty of time for the side effects of the nicotine addiction to go away. It shouldn't change your personality. And what happened in this conversation, because I went to my doctor and I told him this, which I had never done before, he said to me, it's because you have clinical depression. And a light bulb went on over my head and I was like, oh my God, this is why I'm always so sad. This is why I have these thoughts, right? This is why I'm contemplating suicide all the time, even when it doesn't make sense, because it didn't make sense with my life. There was nothing major going on that should have been pushing me in that direction. And so this light bulb went on and I honestly internally like fell down on my knees in gratitude for knowing and having a name to put on this thing I had been experiencing in my life. And so he gave me a prescription to help me quit smoking, which was an antidepressant that they use, that they often prescribe to people to quit smoking. And I took it. I went home, I took it with me, and I quit smoking. And I took this antidepressant. Now, I believe and have believed for years in holistic medicine, and I don't like the idea of being on a pill for my own personal reasons. But part of the reason is because I'm kind of egotistical and I think I should be able to do it myself, right? But also I believe that when we are constantly putting pills in our body or chemicals in our body, that can't be good for us long term, okay? And so I chose to go find a naturopath or to go to my naturopath and find a more natural way to deal with this thing that I now had a diagnosis for. And so I did that. I went to the naturopath and what he gave me worked amazing. And I was able to get off the prescription drugs and get onto a plant medicine type thing. And so I took that for a little while. And it was really awesome. And it helped me. And the reason I'm sharing this is because it helped me get to the point. My commitment, my decision, and these things that were falling into my lap helped me take the edge off so that I could have clarity enough and think straight enough to be able to start to explore what would it really mean to live my life, and to start really taking stock of every area of my life in order to not just medicate the thing, but to really get to the core of what was going on and make some real deep transformation within myself. So, and the reason I'm sharing this with you is because if you're on edge or you're dealing with some of this, and maybe you're on medications, maybe you're not, know that there's no shame in that. There is no shame in getting whatever help you need to be able to survive long enough to actually thrive. So I would encourage you, A, to be open and ask for help, right? Yes, from people around you, from doctors, all of that stuff, but also to the universe. Like being willing to explore the idea that maybe this isn't the way we have to live, and being open to the support that you need to get where you need to go. But take care of yourself first, whatever that looks like. And I've never talked about the fact that I was on antidepressants. I've never talked about the fact that I had to take supplements and stuff to even get my brain to function enough to be able to start down this journey. There is no shame in it. And I'm just now realizing I haven't talked about it because I was still holding some shame around it. And it's crazy what our society has done to us, that with so many people suffering from things like this, we have created a society where we're not allowed to talk about it because it's shameful. And like I said in the beginning, I know it's shifting, but as far as I'm concerned, it's not shifting enough. We all can do more and be a little different in order to allow people to really speak up and vocalize what they need to talk about and get the help that they really need. So if you need help, please, whatever that help looks like for you, please take the action to survive until you can truly thrive. So I hope that helps. It's been a long journey since then, right? Like that wasn't the end of my journey. That was the beginning of this part of my journey. And it's been up and down and sideways and back and forth and flip-flopped. And, it's just understanding. Here is what I truly believe about this. I believe that I had depression, that my depression manifested in the way that it did, because I was so disconnected from who I truly am. And the more that I've gone down this journey of really embracing my soul self, really be open to who was I before I came to this physical experience, and who was I in this physical experience before I allowed all of the external stimulus and opinions and rules and all of that stuff to tell me that I wasn't enough. Who was I? And who would I choose to be? Who would I really truly be if I understood that I am worthy and I am enough and I don't have to be anything different than I am right now? And just allow myself to be and come back into connection with who I am, and come back into connection with that guidance and wisdom inside of me that was able to guide me to where I needed to be. And I'm not saying I did it all myself. I've had multiple books and mentors and supplements and all of that stuff, right? But it's just understanding that it's not normal for us to be disconnected like that. It's not normal for us to feel that way. Pain is not the norm. And we have been raised in the society to believe in a lot of ways that actually is the norm. And I truly believe that some of us have a lot of guilt around even letting ourselves be taken care of or letting ourselves feel good, because then what would it mean for everyone else? And so just encouraging you to explore, like, what would it mean if you were whole, complete, and happy? What would it mean? What would that be like? Because I truly, truly, truly believe and know that is possible for all of us. And it's the reason I do what I do. It's the reason I show up every day. It's the reason I've gotten over my fear of public speaking, of being the face of my business, of, saying stuff that other people might not agree with, right? Like, it's the reason I do all of that. And it's the reason I've worked through my own shit so many different levels and times, because I know that the more of us that do that, and the more I speak out, and the more of us that step into the wholeness of who we are, we give permission for everyone else to do the same. And this is how we heal humanity. This is how we come back to who we are. This is how we change the planet. people talk about your why. Sorry, I'm getting a little teary because people often, especially in business, right? Like I do business coaching and I've had business coaches, although not really traditional type because of my beliefs of business as an extension of self. But people talk all the time in the personal development world and in the business world that's an extension of that around like, what is your why? My why, yes, of course, I have personal stuff that I want and experiences that I want. But my real true why is because I understand that this is the way I can make a difference. And if that means me getting uncomfortable and sharing this stuff with you guys, I'll do it 100 times over. It doesn't matter what the response is. If it means that I might help someone, if it means that I might help humanity heal, it is worth it to me every single time. I appreciate you guys for listening to me. I hope that we can continue to have this conversation around mental illness and around coming back to ourselves. I wanted to talk a little bit about high vibe. I'm starting to call it the high vibe movement because I don't believe that the words high vibe in themselves are wrong. Yes, it's great to be a higher vibrational being, but this high vibe movement that has come, I don't know, over the past 5 or 10 years, I truly believe is doing a disservice. And what I mean by high vibe movement is when you hear things like, particularly when you're talking about, like people are talking about manifestation or whatever, they will tell you or they'll talk about how you need to be high vibe. And there's this idea that like you can't attract what you desire to have unless you're high vibe. The problem with this high vibe movement is it's being taken to mean that means you live in like a very small subset of human emotion, those termed high vibe, right? Happy, joyful, grateful, all of those like higher vibrational emotions, right? We are human. We are spiritual beings here having a human experience. We came to this physical world for a reason. It was not to ignore 95% of the human emotions. It was not to live in a 5% range of human emotions. It was not to deny our humanness, right? It was to come to this physical experience to experience it. And so I truly believe that this take on being high vibe is actually detrimental to any of the forward moving progress we've had around mental illness and depression and anxiety and all of those kinds of things. Because when you're struggling with something like depression, like I was, if someone had told me that I needed to just shift into a high vibe emotion, right? And I was reading books about manifestation and stuff like that along parts of my journey, and it was triggering me. It was actually causing me to feel more broken, more worthless, more unworthy because I couldn't get high vibe enough. And then it was creating this cycle of like, well, since I'm depressed and I'm in these lower density emotions, that means I'm only going to manifest more of the shit that I don't want. And so it created this really ugly cycle for me. And I'm afraid that it's, and I've seen it in my clients, I've seen it in, people I've talked to and worked with, like not necessarily around depression, but just this idea that like when you're not at your happiest, you are somehow screwing up everything you're trying to create in life. And that's just not true. We are human. Like I said, we're here having a human experience. And that means we get to embrace ourselves and hold ourselves for the full range of human emotions that we experience, allowing ourselves to experience them all when they come up, while still having an awareness around, are we choosing to wallow in some lower density stuff? Because there's a difference between allowing yourself to feel a full range of emotions and wallowing in the lower density emotions when you do have the opportunity to choose to move up the emotional scale, right? And I'm not in any way discounting like when you're struggling with depression or anxiety or any of these other mental illnesses, or even if you're just having a bad day, right? I'm not discounting how hard it can be to move through those emotions. What I'm saying is you actually get to love yourself through it all, hold yourself through it all, know that the journey is always perfect, and hopefully have enough awareness to get yourself what you need in those moments when it's time to actually move on or move through so that you're not stuck in a place, right? And so if you hear the term high vibe and it's getting thrown around like that, just know that that's not really when it first started being talked about, that's not really the intention behind it, right? The more we deny who we are, the more we deny our humanness, the harder everything else gets. And then we start to judge ourselves for how we're reacting or how we're feeling. Your feelings are valid. Your feelings are valid. And you get to give yourself the space to explore and experience them without judgment. So, I hope this episode and me being willing and able to push through my fear and really share more of the truth of my journey is helpful to you guys. If you guys are resonating with this, if you find that this is helpful, this show is in its infancy right now if you're listening close to when this released. And I would love to know the episodes that are really resonating with you and like what you would love more of. If this really helped you, please let me know. Let me know that more of this is exactly what you're looking for. And of course, if you love the show and you're getting any value out of it, please go subscribe, rate, write us a review, let us know what you're thinking. Help us reach more people because together we rise. Like that really truly is my belief. Together we rise. And if you're out there hurting and you need someone to talk to, please find someone. And if you can't, I'm all over social media. I'm happy to assist in any way that I can. I love you all so much. Thank you for spending some time with me. And until next time, please remember to embrace your unique magic, to let your inner rebel out to play, and know that you are worthy, you are loved, you are supported, and you are enough.